Dr. Amanda with Straightsmile Solutions, straightsmilesolutions.com. We're going to talk about missing teeth and if you can close that space either through normal driftodontics or drifting, just natural physiology, or with braces or Invisalign. And there's actually 3 different buckets I'm going to talk about. So let's talk about this hypothetical situation. Sometimes someone just gets a cavity and they're like, oh, it's just so too expensive to restore. It's going to be a root canal. I might need a crown lengthening. I'm going to need a post-decor, build up a pin, whatever, a crown, oh no, altogether, even with insurance, it's going to be a couple $1,000s, maybe I should just see if the other teeth can be moved in there instead. And that is a question. Can the other teeth be moved in there instead? Otherwise, you'd have to get an implant, right? Well, the implant's probably going to be more expensive than the pin, the post, the crown, all that. And that's if the implant takes, and the implant can, they don't all take, and they don't all last for a lifetime. When they do, they're great, right? But that's an if. And so my suggestion is to always try to fix and fill the tooth if you can, because that's better. And it's more healthy for you than putting foreign substances in your mouth. But let's say, you can't, or let's say it's congenitally missing. Let's talk about the 3 different buckets. So first thing I'm going to talk about, and they don't all relate to this panel, but let's say, for example, you're just going to have to put on your imagination cap and think about baby E's. Baby E's, that's the baby second molar. That is your A, your J, your K, and your T in US talk. So baby E's. So let's say we've got the baby E and, there's no 5. There's no second premolar. There's no 4. There's no 13. There's no 20. There's no 29, underneath it. Well, what if we pulled it with the other teeth slide forward? I strongly would not ever recommend doing this. Sometimes depending on the timing you can, but usually those E's, they can last a whole lifetime. My mom still has hers and she's in her 70s. So if you take care of them, they can last. Now, of course, that means you don't want to move them too much with ortho, and you don't want to put them in a weird bite, and there's a lot of things you want to do, and there's no promises. It might resorb, but, that would not be my recommendation if you can save that E. Sometimes, they don't survive. And in that case, let's talk about that. If you had to pull that E, I was looking at this case this other day, and it was a patient that was in that scenario where they were congenitally missing their 5s, but the 4 on one side, the way it was placed, because the 5 was missing, was strategically between the D and the E's roots. So you knew the D and E's roots were going to resorb. So that 4 was going to push both baby teeth out. So we knew we're going to lose the E anyway. So the question was, well, what happens if we just pull the E in advance? Then maybe the 6 can just start the process of drifting forward, which will later let the 7 start the process of drifting forward. We can always finish it up in some ortho. Well, in that case, that kind of makes sense to me. So that is like the one scenario where that makes sense. There's a few other scenarios. Let's say you're congenitally missing 1 E, and you have severe crowding, and the patient is way too old to do expanders. Incisors are really flared. She's bimax, maybe lip incompetent. We know we're going to pull some premolars anyways. Well, instead of pulling a premolar on one side, we can pull the E. Okay, that's pretty much the other suggestion or scenario I can think of where that would be okay. But they'd have to be really, really carotid, and we couldn't resolve it through expansion and super flared and lip incompetent. And yes, we have to remove teeth, which I rarely do. So again, this is a one-off. All right, so that's the E's. Let's talk about the 6s now. So again, for the E's, we're talking about pulling that, catching this at 8, 9, 10. If you want that to drift or even to be able to close it with braces, 8, 9, 10 is when you need to pull it. And like I said, there's no guarantee it's going to drift nicely on its own. You're probably going to have to finish it up in ortho. So just keep that in mind. You might get some improvement on its own with nature, but I never give any guarantees. I can't control what nature does. Okay. Sorry, quick coffee break. Let's talk about the 6s now. So now we're talking about what happens when the first molars are having to pull due to caries. What is the chance that the 7 or the second molar will either drift congenitally forward or could be closed by braces or Invisalign? Well, you can kind of see what happened here. So this is a great example of what happens depending on the timing of when you do things. So, so same thing goes for for this. If you decide you're gonna pull a 6, the sooner you pull it, the better. So the best age to pull it is 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11's already pushing it, because now this, once the apex is formed on the 7 or the second molar, it's not happening. It's not happening. So that what you see is what you get, and then they just start to tip like they're doing right here, and then they get perio defects if you don't start the ortho ASAP, and then you're either going to have some very expensive grafting procedures, which will probably be more than if you restored the tooth to begin with, or and implants, or you're going to have some very complicated ortho, which is may or may not even work out. So you got to do it early if you're going to do the 6s, like early. And again, same thing. Don't do this if you can restore it. This is only if you absolutely, I mean, if it's so bombed out that there's no way the kid could do it, you know, it's just the caries is down to the furcation or whatever. Okay, well, then we got to do what we got to do. I mean, I really hope that 6, 7, 8-year-olds aren't having this happen. That seems like some bad parenting to me and some negligence, but okay, have I seen it? Yes, I've absolutely seen it. So that would be that scenario. And again, you got to jump on the ortho fast. You can't wait too long. They got to be committed to doing the ortho at the right time. If they just let things go, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get tippity-doo. The younger you do it, the more likely everything is to migrate on its own. And of course, if the patient is pretty crowded and by max, usually we can use that space up as opposed to doing sequential distalization, pulling a tooth, or doing IPR, or maybe expanding that side. So can always finish it up in ortho, but the timing has to be done at the right time. Okay, and then lastly is the most improbable, which is what happens if the second molar is pulled, will the third molar come in its place? Yeah, usually that does not happen, sorry. I don't know if I've rarely, if ever, seen that happen. And again, the earlier you do it, the better. It would have to be pulled right at 12, 13. We will not finish that up in ortho though. That we don't move. I don't know anyone that deals with moving third molars. That's a hassle. They just have weird conical roots and they're short clinical crowns and they just don't behave. And it's a third molar. So if it drifts, fantastic. If it doesn't, you don't need it. It can come out. It usually works out fine. Yeah, if no promises on that, that's your choice. And that's not even going to happen until they're 18, 19, 20, 21. And if somehow you really wanted to try, I think I've done it a few times in Invisalign, you know, set up a limited case. Okay, we can try it later and see if we can do it. But again, this is a no promises situation. So the moral of the story is always better to restore the tooth if you can. Don't think about money, because it's going to end up being more money later, and regardless, and it's going to end up being more of a hassle and a lot less predictable. So hopefully that helps. All right, thanks so much.